In a small village by a quiet river, where the wind whispered through clay fields, lived a little girl and her grandmother in a modest hut. Every day, the two of them would shape clay into little bowls and pots, then carefully place them into the glowing kiln. They didn't have much, but never once felt lacking. The girl's name was Mira, 14 years old. She had never left the village, never thought of distant dreams. Her life was wrapped in the scent of damp earth, the warmth of the kiln, and the fairy tales her grandmother told by the glow of an oil lamp. Until one day, Mira went to school. A whole new world opened up, one where every child was asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" But for Mira, that question became a strange door, a door that led inward, where she began to wonder, do we really have to go far to find something our hearts have quietly held all along? This isn't just Mira's story. It's the question many of us carry, in a vast world full of voices calling our name. The school drum echoed through the quiet morning of the small village. Mira stood still in front of the old wooden gate of the newly built school. For the first time in her life, the 14-year-old girl stepped out of her grandmother's pottery workshop, out of the world filled with the scent of clay, ashes, and the glow of burning coal. Today, Mira was going to school. Her brown dress was worn thin by time. Her plastic sandals were old and soft, but her eyes sparkled with both excitement and shyness. Inside the classroom, the other kids chatted eagerly about city life, video games, dreams of becoming doctors, astronauts, scientists. Mira just sat quietly, looking at her hands used to holding clay, shaping pots, stacking firewood. When the teacher walked in, all eyes turned to the blackboard, except Mira's. She was still caught staring at the world map hanging at the front of the class. It was the first time she had ever seen one. So many strange lands, so many names she had never heard. Something about it was both fascinating and impossibly far away. The teacher smiled warmly and said, "Today, I want each of you to share with the class. Who do you want to be when you grow up?" A simple question, but for Mira, it became the beginning of a journey. Not outward, but deep within herself. One by one, hands shot up. One by one, innocent voices filled the classroom. "I want to be a doctor. I'll be an engineer and build bridges. I wish I could fly to the moon." Laughter, applause, and bright eyes lit up the room, each child aiming for horizons far, far away. Mira sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly together. In her mind, there were no doctors, no astronauts, only the spinning wheel in the pottery corner, where every afternoon her grandmother shaped clay and softly sang an old lullaby. She remembered the crackling firewood in the kiln, the tiny fractures on her very first clay pot. She had never imagined being anything else. Then it was Mira's turn. The teacher smiled gently. "And you? What do you dream of becoming?" Mira stood up. Her voice was small but honest. I don't know. I just helped my grandma make pottery." A brief silence. Then the room burst into laughter. "Nobody wants to be a potter forever. That's just for poor people." Mira lowered her head, not because she was ashamed, but because for the first time in her life, she felt different. In a classroom filled with dazzling dreams, Mira suddenly felt like she had stepped into a world where there was no space for the simple things. And she began to wonder, do dreams always have to be big and far away to be worth something? That afternoon, Mira returned home with her thoughts in a blur. Her grandmother was still tending the kiln, the fire flickering beneath the golden hue of sunset. Mira sat down beside the pile of firewood, but her hands, so used to shaping clay, were clumsy and uncertain today. "How was school, my dear?" her grandmother asked, eyes still fixed on the half-fired vase. Mira stayed silent for a long moment, then softly replied, "Grandma, everyone at school has a dream. They all want to become something big. But me, I just want to come home and make pottery with you. Like always. Does that count as a dream?" Her grandmother chuckled gently, her eyes narrowing through the smoke. "You know, when I was your age, I didn't even know the word dream. All I knew was clay. But I loved every grain of it, every wisp of smoke. And that was enough." Mira looked up at her. A stillness settled over the room, quiet, yet filled with meaning, as if all the answers she had been searching for were hidden right there in that simple truth. That night, lying beside the fading warmth of the fire, Mira couldn't sleep. Her mind kept circling around the things her teacher had said. Your dream must have a destination, a future, a grand purpose. But if she already felt joy in doing what she loved each day, wasn't that, in some way, a dream already fulfilled? The teacher had said, a dream is something you chase, something far away. But Mira wondered, if I've already found what I love, found peace, do I still have to go somewhere else? Why do people always believe happiness is something ahead of us, and never something we already hold? That question didn't make Mira feel lost. It made her feel free. She began to see everything around her with new eyes. The earth doesn't dream of being stone. The water doesn't long to become a cloud. A tree doesn't leave its roots to chase the sun. It simply lives fully, right where it was planted. Mira sighed, then smiled. It wasn't that she didn't have a dream. She had just never thought to call it something grand. She only knew that waking up each morning, feeling the cool clay in her hands, hearing her grandmother's soft singing, and smelling the warm ash in the air, that was enough. And maybe that's the most beautiful kind of dream. Not the kind we chase, but the kind we've quietly lived beside all along, without even realizing it. The next morning, the classroom buzzed with the usual chatter. Early sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden streaks across desks and chairs. Mira sat quietly in the corner, her fingers playing with the frayed button on her shirt, eyes drifting toward the window, where the wind flipped over small leaves still clinging to their branches. The teacher walked in, his eyes gently finding Mira's, like a quiet reminder. Yesterday, your answer wasn't very clear, Mira. Have you thought it through? Who do you want to become in the future? The whole class turned toward her again. The same looks, curious, expectant, quietly judging. Mira stood up, taking a deep breath. This time, she knew she couldn't give the same answer as before. She smiled, nodded, and said, I want to be an architect, to build beautiful houses for people. The teacher beamed. The class clapped. It was a perfect answer, clear, practical, admirable. Mira sat down, feeling a strange kind of relief, but also a quiet emptiness. Because deep down, when she said those words, her heart didn't race. There was no spark, no fire like the one she felt in the corner of the pottery workshop, hands deep in clay, beside her grandmother's humming voice. She had only said what others wanted to hear. Her gaze drifted back to the window. Outside, a dry leaf spun slowly to the ground, carried by the wind. Clouds floated by, without direction, without urgency, but with grace. She heard birds calling to each other over the hills, and the wind slipping through the cracks of the window, like it was humming a forgotten song. Mira wondered, maybe everything in nature doesn't try so hard to be something else. So why do we, as people, always push ourselves to become someone we're not, just to belong? That thought rippled through her like soft waves breaking against a quiet shore. She didn't hate the idea of being an architect, but she knew it wasn't the thing that made her feel truly alive. It was simply a well-fitting costume, tailored for others' expectations, not her soul. And in that moment, Mira understood. Sometimes to fit in, we say what the world wants to hear. But to be at peace with ourselves, we have to listen to something softer, something that whispers deep within the heart. And Mira knew, with a calm certainty, in this world, many live chasing the dreams of others. But she was still searching for a way to live true to her own. The school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. Children burst out of the classroom like a flock of birds breaking free from a cage. Mira walked slowly, quietly clutching her bag, heading toward the back of the hill, where a small patch of grass and a line of silent trees stood still, as if waiting for someone to truly listen. She sat down, lifting her gaze to the sky where the sunlight was beginning to fade. Clouds drifted lazily above. No rush, no destination, no plan. And yet, they were beautiful in their own quiet way. Mira gently asked herself, Is there really such a thing as the right path? Or are they just old trails drawn long ago? Paths that punish anyone who dares to step off course. She noticed a tiny ant struggling to drag a leaf far larger than its own body. A sudden breeze swept across the hill, lifting both the leaf and the ant into the air. But after tumbling back to the ground, the ant simply kept going. No one had to teach it what to do. It just did what felt right. Mira smiled softly. Maybe she was like that little ant. No clear answers, no grand vision, no final destination carved in stone. But one thing she knew for certain. She wouldn't choose a path just because it came with applause. Because in this vast, echoing world, sometimes it's the ones who refuse to follow the well-worn roads who end up creating new ones. Paths not lit by praise, but by the quiet glow of staying true. Maybe in this life, not everyone needs a perfectly drawn map to know who they're meant to become. Maybe you don't have to chase something far away to say you're living with purpose. Mira, the quiet girl from that humble village, taught us something simple yet deeply profound. That to live true to your feelings, to listen to your own voice, is already a journey worth taking. In a world that's always rushing forward, sometimes standing still is its own kind of progress. And no path is meaningless, as long as it's one you chose yourself, with an honest heart, because in the end, the destination might not be some faraway place. It might live in each step you take, in every glance you give, in quiet afternoons spent under an open sky. Just like Mira, growing gently, in her own quiet way.